Welcome, everybody, to a special episode of Myth Informed with your hosts, myself, Brian Edward, and Sean Frasick.
Sitting in for Dima again.
Sitting in for Dima again. He's off in other worlds, right? Fighting his nemesis atop a clock tower.
Yeah.
Okay.
Making bad jokes on Twitter.
So today we have with us Dr. Peter Bogosian, an assistant professor at philosophy at Portland State University, an affiliated faculty member at Oregon Health Science University in the Division of General Internal Medicine. His popular pieces can be found in Scientific American, Time, The Philosopher's Magazine, and elsewhere, including scientific journals of various sorts. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. We're honored to have you on, and you are coming to the next Mythcon in September, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And but yeah, we're really excited to have you here. And I know we got some questions on the Atheos app. Brian, I'll let you go ahead and
sure.
Yeah, so and this is I think true for both of us a little bit. Like MM as an organization has come out of kind of the atheist and skeptic world and are kind of facing in a different way. Our new mission is to promote viewpoint diversity to limit the effects of authoritarianism with the vision of a more pluralistic society. And I think that
I just want to pause and say I love that. You'd never push that idea in the university. That's completely absent from our contemporary university architecture. I just love that idea, though, and I fully support that mission.
Well, thank you, sir. Yeah, and it sounds like you've also spoken at many secular and atheist conferences, but when I look at your content these days, it sort of sounds like, again, you're in this similar mission space. And
I think that's right. How do we have people are hungry for conversations right now? They're hungry for authentic, genuine conversations about morally relevant issues, things that are morally important. Factory farming. Should we have a border wall? Should everybody have a gun? Should nobody have a gun? People are hungry for these conversations, and we're not having them. We're too terrified of offending people. We don't know how to have them. Hence my next book, How to Have Impossible Conversations.
And that's really good.
I love it. And before we get into the Atheos app thing, I guess, I just want to chime in there and thank you for doing that, offering the platforms for these ideas to have discussions around these ideas. And I think you've kind of seen it. You have Sargon coming up. I'm booking an event for Sargon in Manhattan, and the struggle is real. I mean, whether it's on a campus or even at a private event, in a lot of cases, the decision makers are just utilizing Google. They're going to Rational Wiki. They're seeing all of these terrible, slanderous and biased sources from these authoritarian people. I think they're doing the right thing by trying to censor people. And so quote unquote, the normies, people that don't understand what's happening in this world are feeding into this. And it's a real challenge to platform these, individuals or these types, even these ideas. And I think it should be, respected, especially in the atheist world, to take on these types of topics and utilize critical thinking and logic to, move the conversation forward. And I really appreciate that you're doing that.
Yeah, I think so. It was interesting. I approached the administration about my idea of how to have impossible conversations. And I told them I think we should do a rebranding initiative because the diversity brand is crowded. I think people are tired of it, or certainly getting tired of it. And they have a hunger for these conversations. And the administration, I can understand why they didn't want it. So I'm going to do it at a local library. I'm not going to tweet it out. Almost no publicity, because we don't want. A lot of people say, well, you just want protesters. Or actually, no, that's why I'm not going to tweet it out. I actually want a conversation. Sean, if you and I are in a car, we were just in Phoenix together, and we need to drive to someplace like Flagstaff, and the car breaks down, and I don't know anything about cars, but let's say I flip open the hood and look at the engine, and I say, well, it might be this, and you pull out a bullhorn and start screaming and playing music. That doesn't help us fix the problem in the car so that we can get to Flagstaff. So the idea that we want protesters there is crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to have a conversation.
Exactly.
So I'm not tweeting it out. We're not advertising for our absolute minimum. Maybe the organization CFI might sponsor it. And then we can talk to people. We can have genuine conversations with people. But those conversations, I can tell you with unequivocal certainty, they are not happening in universities right now.
I think you're right. And the conversation in your analogy would be, Sean thinks the alternator is fried and you think it's the fuel line. And either of those are possible. Neither are possible, but nothing will be accomplished if you tell him that it's immoral to suggest that the alternator may have gone.
Yeah, if I start if he tells me it's the alternator and can I swear on your show?
Yes.
And I start screaming, fuck you, Nazi, fascist, racist, bigot, pig. And he tries to say like something, and then I say, see, there's proof. And I'm adamant that it's the carburetor or whatever it is.
Yeah. Right. It must be an older car if it's got the carburetor. But
well, but it's even worse. I mean, like the fact that you can't advertise, and you're absolutely right with that. I've gone through it. I got deplatformed already in Brooklyn with the venue hosting Sargon last year. Our venue got threatened and hundreds of emails just because we wanted to bring different topics. And this came out of the atheist community, which was really, really disappointing for me. But yeah, the fact that you can't mark events.
So can I pause you on that?
Sure.
So I think it came out of the atheist community because this is complicated, but this sort of censorship, the right has its own type of censorship. And if you look at Greg Lukianoff's organization, FIRE.
Yes, FIRE.
He details this. Jonathan Haidt details this in the Heterodox Academy. It makes perfect sense to me that this came out of left-wing atheism. So for the Sargon event, for example, I don't think that event, we're doing that May 31st at Portland State University. I don't think that event will be deplatformed. I don't know what's going to happen where the student group has taken out a Smith Ballroom, which is like a 900-seat venue. I don't know. The last event he did was disrupted. So our initial idea was it was going to be we were going to explore our philosophical differences, and we were going to have a spirited conversation, not quite a debate, but a spirited conversation about a wide range of issues. And then all these people started attacking me and attacking him because we wanted to have this conversation and claiming I'm giving a platform to fascists, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, why would I want to explore my differences then?
Yeah.
This is like the guy, we're trying to get the car somewhere, to re-employ that analogy. So now we're just going to talk about the problems that we see on the intellectual and ideological problems, bias response teams, intersectional feminism, et cetera. So, I mean, if they're going to protest the event anyway, or if they're going to disrupt the event anyway, then that's not what I want to do.
Right. It seems like then you're right. If you have significant differences with, say, Sargon or Ben Shapiro or maybe Steven Pinker, but yet you're
less so
considered
Pinker,
on the same side. So the argument,
none with Steven Pinker, but much more so with Ben
Ben.
Shapiro. Too,
okay.
sure.
Okay. So with Ben, but then you're arguing with, say, Ben Shapiro, whether it's the alternator or the carburetor, and then there's somebody else that's saying, why are you guys even on Route 66? You shouldn't even be on Route 66, which kind of now puts you together.
Yeah, and they're screaming at us for trying to fix the problem and for even talking about the problem in the car.
Right.
Yeah.
And that because you guys shouldn't be using cars, we should be using trains or something else.
I mean, it's terrible to say, but it really does enforce a kind of tribalism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It enforces a kind of like, why am I going to explore differences with somebody when the same people are attacking us brutally in the same unethical way? And it's not just that it's an attack of the ideas. It goes, and I hope I don't lose people when I say this, but it goes from the epistemological realm to the moral realm. In other words, it goes from an argument about how people know whether it's the carburetor or an alternator to an argument about the fact that you're suggesting it's the carburetor makes you a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're doing needs to be done. I think we need to see more people that are willing. And yes, you're right. There are probably going to be people that are trying to disrupt and, trying to shout you down. But the more people like you and like what we're doing, I think the more people that were willing to stand up for this, like what Kilroy did, it only helps normalize these types of conversations, and it makes it easier for people in the future.
It definitely normalized it, in so much that the New York Times, referred to the intellectual dark web, which I think you're a member of. And as that's mainstreaming in a way. So I do think that there's like legitimate value here.
So I think I want to return to something Sean said quickly. So the idea that it's not just that we have these conversations, but people don't have these modeled for us. Yep. So with the Brett, Heather, Christine Hoff Summers event that I did at Portland State University, there was a tenured faculty member behaving no sense of decorum, no sense of, I'm not a big fan of appropriateness, but no sense of professionalism. She started yelling out, screaming, and subsequent posts were pretty intense. People don't know how to have these conversations, and they're seeing their intellectual role models do exactly the opposite of what they should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think professionalism is played down in a lot of these cases. That word sums up a lot of the behaviors that we shouldn't be seeing. And you're right; these are by senior people. These are by decision makers. These are by people that should know better and should understand what professionalism is. And yeah, it's extremely unfortunate. And it was, again, I think in the atheist world, one of the problems that they're having is this type of behavior and this type of people's reactions to atheism originally, when you're talking about Madeleine Murray O'Hair and, even early Richard Dawkins, the God question, things like that, there was a real need to have these conversations and discussions with atheism. But now we've gotten to a point where that's more mainstream in the West. I understand in Saudi Arabia and Kenya and all these other places, it's still an uphill battle. But in this world, that's been so normalized that it's kind of like, whatever. But I think the social political spectrum, this is the next area where we have to start having these conversations, because people are acting insane, and people that you would think are more respectful are acting extremely nutty. Like, professionalism is lost on these people.
Yeah, and at the same time, in the Middle East and in Bangladesh and other places, if you suggest that Muhammad may not have been the prophet that he says that he was, or question perhaps that he didn't, fly on a winged horse, you can run into the same crazy problems with violence.
Yeah,
so,
but I mean, an analogy there. But an analogy there, I'm not a complete analogy, but if someone says on Twitter, hey, there's multiple levels of sexual harassment, well, now the mob's going after them. Now, obviously, the death penalty is not in play there. But it's still, when you're ruining someone's career and, you're really going after them, it's scary. Yeah. It's very scary.
Right.
So,
and just like being hacked to death. And, so it's a big deal, right? I mean, like it's really.
Yeah, I think
places have different concerns.
I think people take what Twitter is a cesspool, and I think people take what the comments or the tweets of others far, far too seriously. We need to have some kind of discerning judgment about whose voice matters, Jabba the Hutt 652 with a picture of Leia in change telling me, Dave Rubin said something to me really once. He said, if you're walking down the street and someone in a giant egg costume comes up to you and starts screaming fascist, pig, racist, you'd think you wouldn't pay any attention at all. But yet on Twitter, why do we look at that? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to just realize. And the other thing is, you don't even know, it could, for all we know, it could be just one person who continuously screams racist. Mm-hmm. They have 20 sock puck bird accounts, and I can think of a few people off the top of my head who fall into that category.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it hurts you, right? In the same way that racist, bigot, fascists is a blight on your character, and you don't want that to sink in. You don't want people to feel that it's there. In the same way that maybe the word atheist you don't want that on you in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, hold on about that. So I think those terms have been overused so much that they just don't resonate morally with people anymore. Everybody is if you're a white guy with dreadlocks, you've appropriated and you're a racist. So if you start calling everybody a racist, I mean, this is an idea that has a pretty extensive pedigree. You start calling everybody a racist, the term doesn't have any meaning. And the worst thing about that is that there are actual racists out there.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm not worried about. I used to be somewhat concerned, but now I'm less than zero because the words have no moral weight anymore.
That's true. And Mark Lilla says that's a slur, not an argument.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's becoming that much of a slur anymore. If you eat tacos on Tuesdays and these lunatics are calling you a racist, that they just we need to figure out whose voices don't matter, and their voices just don't matter.
I will say this though, I understand what you're saying, but the advantage you have and the advantage a lot of us have in this world is that we're actually numb to those terms. The problem is, again, the executives, the people that don't understand online culture, when they go and look up Peter Boghossian and they see racist and misogynist or whatever, that is still, that still affects your reputation, unfortunately. And the fact that, we're having problems platforming certain individuals is because of the slanderous talk, and it needs to stop. Like,
I agree. I guess my concern, I don't really care anymore.
Yeah.
Because I have, here's kind of something interesting. I have 6 Chinese people living in my house. My daughter's adopted from China. My son's been living in China for 10 months. And I heard this guy tell me I hate Chinese people. I mean, I've stopped caring about I've just stopped caring. And I've stopped caring if people Google me and it says Bogosian's a fascist and a Nazi and a Nazi. I just don't care anymore. I have other concerns, but I just don't take those seriously. But it's also because of the station in my life, and I'm 50, am I 51? But I totally understand your position. Some, people calling Sargon a fascist or whatever they're calling him, alt-right. I understand those concerns. My concern is a related concern. My concern is with the diversity board. You don't have a diversity board over you guys. I have a diversity board lording over me. And we can talk about this. It will take us down a little rabbit hole, but let me give you a quick example, if I may. Native Americans are a protected class. And we can talk about what protected classes means and who falls under a protected class. I used to do something in my science and pseudoscience class where I looked at various claims and I analyzed them from historical, scientific, different perspectives. One claim I used to take a look at was, did Native Americans live in harmony with the land? This is something have you guys heard that?
No, it's an interesting thought experiment. I haven't heard of this, but go on.
Well, I'm no longer allowed to look at the question, did Native Americans live in harmony with the land, because Native Americans are a protected class. So I can't examine that anymore in an academic
Or
context.
is it assumed that the definition of living in harmony with the land is how the Native Americans, applied their system of culture?
Yeah, and that's totally irrelevant. That's an argument that could be made on one side or the other. My point is that because of diversity boards, Title IX, protected classes, those questions can now no longer be asked in an academic setting.
Because it would further marginalize them, I think,
because they're a protected class.
Wow.
Now, you could come out on one side of the issue, but you couldn't, if the results of a sincere investigation found that the Native Americans hunted certain species to extinction, for example, that could easily be construed as attacks on a protected class. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to go on to something else?
No,
but it'd be interesting.
Talk about that.
What if you were Native American yourself? Would it be okay then?
That's very interesting, because I just went to a really, really good presentation by a guy in my department about decolonizing the philosophical tradition. And somebody in the audience asked, well, we're settlers, we're colonists, so how could we criticize this idea, these ideas? The fact that somebody even asked that, the whole thought behind West philosophy is the Socratic method, counterexamples, thesis, antithesis. We argue, we debate, we challenge. And the fact that a tradition, an intellectual tradition that would be exempted from that is the ultimate form of the bigotry of low expectations. These people have dark skin, therefore we cannot challenge or question their ideas because of the way we are situated as white people or as olive or whatever you are, as a colonist, as an oppressor. We cannot challenge their ideas. But do you see what's more insidious that's happening there is if you say that those ideas should be subject to challenge and the idea is that they're not, and then you say, well, then I don't think any ideas should not be included in the canon or taught in the university unless they can be subject to criticism. And Native Americans' philosophy, if it can't be subject to criticism, it shouldn't be taught. Then people will say, well, you hate Native Americans. As opposed to saying, well, you know what? All ideas from all cultures it's an idea in a philosophy class. It should be subject to criticism. It doesn't matter the color of their skin, what continent they happen to live on. Yep. If this is an idea and you want to play the game of philosophy, the coin of the realm in the game is we investigate, interrogate ideas, we give counterexamples, we challenge them, we question them. And you know what? That should not be controversial.
Right. No, and it's not. And there, like between North American tribes, there is slavery that, you know, capture an enemy part of the tribe. You have them be raised as that member. I mean, against their will. There's slavery in the Aztec Empire, the War of the Flowers. I mean, all of the sacrifices that the Aztec.
Okay, we haven't talked
and others. So
right.
I mean,
we haven't talked about any specifics. You should look at the book, The Washing of the Spears. And in that book, the authors and anthropologists talks about certain tribes in the sub-Sahara hunting down other tribes to extinction because they view them as inferior. This idea that there's something intrinsic to having white skin that causes that is absurd.
Of course, yes.
But bringing that up, people from the sub-Sahara are a protected class.
And again, this is what bothers me is that I've seen things in different colleges that, you know, the depravity of whiteness as a college course, and the term whiteness itself. I mean, it really suggests that culture is downstream from race, that there's something about being white that creates this colonial culture. I mean, but this is the argument of the alt-right. They believe that race, that the culture is downstream from race too, except for they think the only people that can steward Western civilization are white people. And that,
so there is one component that is missing in this analysis, and then unless we articulate this component, the whole thing falls apart. The people on the left, so you're right. It's like a horseshoe.
Yep.
The people on the left believe that is 100% entirely a construct and socially driven, and there's no genetic or biological heritability, and that's a specific word, so we need to be careful how we use that. There's no genetic or biological basis to this whatsoever. But the people on the right offer up the same ideas, and I'm thinking of certain people that I won't name to give them credence, plus I don't want 500 emails in my box and more diversity board comments, but the people on the right have the same idea, but that the reason that takes place is genetic or fundamentally biological. That's the difference. You have to understand this woke leftness as biology denialism.
Yeah,
I tend to agree that there's science denialism. On the right, and this is even on the traditional right, usually takes the form of climate change denial. And on the left, it's social sciences denial.
And I see it more as, you know, I'm more of a black and white person. Like I see it more as just straight up cowardness. Like one of the panel that you're coming to Mythcon to speak on is a topic on intersectionality. And we're looking for, you know, PhD qualified candidates or, you know, professor level. And this has been, you know, when I say the struggle is real, this is the weirdest thing I've ever gone through. You know, we've been doing this for a long time. We collectively have spent 16 to 20 hours plus just writing emails. We've collectively reached out to 75 plus individuals that would qualify for this. And the amount of responses that we have just been staggering, or I should say non-responses. We haven't gotten any responses, and the responses that we do get are criticizing us for what we're trying to do, just for having this conversation. And out of all of this, we've had one person that's willing to come on, and Dr. Leanne Stanley. I applaud her courage. But it's just a weird scenario. We're still trying to find.
Okay. So we should talk about that.
Yeah.
So I told you my initial concern with this panel is, if you have it's not enough that you're just a PhD in this, because I can already tell you that the criticism I will receive.
Mm-hmm.
So if this conversation doesn't go well, or the person articulating the virtues of intersectionality might not do, and I'm not saying anything about her whatsoever, I'm just saying in general, people will accuse me, Lindsay, and Rutledge of punching down, right? Now, if the person, this is where identity politics comes in. That's why I don't think there should be 3 women on the other side and then 3 men, right? Because we already have 3 men. The optics isn't that good for that. But unless the person on the other side is published in scholarly journals, academic journals, gender studies journals in the top 20, I can already predict in fact, save this clip. Why don't you save this clip and then play it? Every time somebody tweets out that person wasn't a gender scholar, etc., you heard it from me first right now. They're going to claim, well, that person wasn't really published, so they're not qualified to speak.
Okay, but here's the flip side, and let me just put this challenge.
We'll
out
save
there.
this next.
What I mean, does it matter though whether we're having the people that are at the heart of the theory? Most of this is in practice. What if we had a person who was very high up in a powerful company, head of HR, that was fully on for intersectionality? Right. This is the most practical application of it. I think a debate with that person would be just as warranted.
But then you're going to have people say, well, look at that. Look at Bogosian does. Bogosian, Lindsay, and Rutledge are 3 people who have, Rutledge is insanely well published. Mm-hmm. 3 people, he has about 100 publications at this point. So you have 3 people with doctorates and 3 people with HR with no experience in engagement. I mean, so again, the problem is, I sincerely do not see how a case can be made for intersectionality at any reasonable level. So if these folks come up there and it doesn't go well for them, some card is going to be pulled out. Well, you guys are academics. You have 3 PhDs, hundreds of publications among you.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't published, or they don't. So that's why I said my hesitancy. There are so many people who have published in top gender studies journals. Just start going down the list and pulling out names and just invite them, and they'll still say no.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you, Peter. There's always critics, no matter what the topic is. I mean, the Thomas Smith and Sargon thing, the critics were saying, oh, he's cheering for rape. That wasn't true at all. But the critics are going to come up with whatever narrative they want to come up with. But what I think it does, and this is the interesting thing, even, Leanne goes up there and say we're not able to find anyone else, it starts that conversation as to why aren't people willing to come on stage. And I understand what you're saying as far as critics coming after you, saying you're punching down. Well, then show up. Somebody needs to show up to challenge you guys.
Okay, so first of all, they don't value, so that idea itself, you value discourse and reason and dialogue, and that is absent from their canon. That is absent from their milieu. They don't value these things. It's just not, that's not how they play the game. In fact, even doing so is engaging the fascist, platform. We don't want to platform the fascist. Instead of saying, okay, let's really take a look at these ideas right now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's true for the radicals. It is. I mean, but Dr. Stanley, I think she would object to the whole punching down. She seems like a very strong woman that doesn't need to be protected.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to tell, and I'm not saying this, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen right now. Has she published anything in intersectionality? No, she hasn't. I Google Scholared her.
Right. Oh, well, that's true. But I mean, so you either scrap it, but like in any scientific paper, and you know this, I mean, and you criticize, you talk about your materials and methods, and then you criticize your own work and say, well,
okay,
we could have a broader study. This would be better. I mean,
Brian, I'm telling you,
maybe we'll have critiques, but we have some.
Look, I'm telling you, it's like Sean and I going back to, I forget where we were driving, to Flagstaff.
Yeah.
And then people criticizing us because neither one of us are mechanics. But let's say I'm a mechanic and Sean never opened the hood of a car in his life. That's probably exactly the opposite. I've never opened the hood of a car in my life. Sean's the mechanic.
Okay.
And somebody's criticizing. I lost it when I flipped the people, but somebody's making the criticism that she's not qualified to talk about intersectionality because she's not published in the area. That's how the academic game works.
I agree, but I agree with you 100%, Peter. But again, it makes their position weaker, especially to the logical people that say, okay, if that's your criticism, show up. We had one person that did.
I agree.
They did the exact same thing. They took us to task why this panel is terrible and how we don't have enough intersectionals and how we don't have enough in this and that and this. And guess what our next question was? Well, that's a fantastic opinion. Do you want to be on the panel? No. Okay, so now again,
you have to have a solution if you're going
exactly. So the critics and I agree with you, there are going to be those critics. There's going to be those critics in every panel. I mean, the one with Derek Blackman and Marissa J. Johnson, we're going to get criticized for. The one with Karen Strawn and Karen Garst, we're going to get criticized for. Every single panel that's there this year, Peter, we're going to get criticized for. But the point is, the logical people, if all you're doing is complaining and you're not offering
I totally agree. So even the Karen panel, Karen Garst, I know her very well. I've read her book. She has a PhD. Nobody could accuse her. She's given guest lectures in my classes. I've seen her speak publicly before large audiences. Nobody can say that she's not legit.
Yeah, she is.
And again, I really want you guys to know I'm not making a criticism of Leanne. I totally understand your position. All I'm saying is that this is a concern I have.
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, is that they don't value dialogue and discourse like the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't value dialogue and discourse, that's the beginning of your problem. So, Locke has a famous quotation, if you don't know the other side of the case, you don't even know your side. So I would argue that one of the things I said in a recent panel is, how many people here are gender studies majors? How do I know that Martha Nussbaum's criticism of Judith Butler is not taught in any of your classes? Now, Martha Nussbaum is one of the world's preeminent philosophers, and she happens to be female. So you can't play the female card, right? You can't play this. Well, I know this because these folks look at their classrooms as an ideology mill. And my suspicion is that they don't look at intersectionality just as a heuristic, but this is almost entirely morally motivated for people.
It can't be. But in that way, doesn't that, if there's a gender studies professor that will refuse to ever debate anyone, no matter whom it is, on the merits,
their passion,
doesn't that disqualify them?
Yeah.
Doesn't that disqualify them as an appropriate person?
Well,
it should make every rational, independent inquirer who's sincere, trying to figure out about is intersectionality. What is it? Is it a theory? Is this a good explanatory mechanism for the world? It should make every single one of those people immediately suspicious of this pernicious ideology that, like octopus tentacles, has just wrapped itself around the architecture of the university.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that being willing to do it is a requirement for being qualified.
I agree. But I will say, as Peter, your hesitance and your concern is noted 100%. We will save this clip. It's noted. I will say this, though. It's just like we were saying before. We have to have these conversations, and
100% agree.
And I think having the conversations and having those critics come to the forefront is actually going to be helpful, because logical people are going to say, well, then you show up and do it. And if you don't, shut up, shit or get off the toilet.
And if you are a person that's listening that believes in intersectional theory or believes in parts of it, and you think and somebody that wants to be on this panel, please contact us. We'd be happy to do that. Really.
Yeah. And I want to add to that, but not just a local Yahoo, because again,
right.
We're looking
Lindsay,
for an
Rutledge,
academic.
and I are very well credentialed.
Mhm.
And this has to be somebody preferably with an academic position,
Correct.
even more preferably who's published in one of these journals, or even I'll even say, what about just a few popular pieces about intersectionality?
Mhm.
You know, I
Sure.
suppose too. I mean, we could make an exception if you were a person that is in like human resources or in some like that. That might there would be interesting exceptions that I think that we would look at. But
Yeah, if you made that exception, make sure the other two people have PhDs in gender studies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm with you on that. And you know, again, you know, the critics always seem to have complaints but never solutions. We've seen
Absolutely.
it time and time again. And I think it's an extremely important discussion to have. And
Well, this is an opportunity for your listeners to submit the names of people.
Exactly.
This is it right now. Why don't you give them your email address? Make it easy for them.
Absolutely. Mythicistmilwaukee@gmail.com. It's and our phone number is on our website too. So
or our Twitter at MythicistMKE.
yes,
At us,
reach out
well,
to us.
we can DM you
and
too.
we are going to be starting to go to social to look for more.
And every university, as far as I know, has some gender studies department. So, I mean, we're talking about thousands of people on the faculty here. You're telling me you can't find one? Not you guys, but you're telling me there's not one? Well, yeah, probably not, because they realize at its core, this is unfalsifiable if they look at in terms of scientific.
We had one that did want to do it that was in there, but that particular date they were not available. So that
I wonder about that.
Unlucky of the geez.
And you know, when I did with Heather and excuse me, Helen and James, we did the James Damore event.
Yeah.
Before it was going to be just James Damore and I, Andy No invited upon my prompting, invited the entire tenure and tenure track faculty of women's studies at PSU to be on stage with just James Damore and myself, and nobody took it. And then when I was on stage the next 2 days later, February 19th, I invited the same folks to do it again, to be on stage and have a conversation with James Lindsay, who's going to be on the Mythicist panel, Helen Pluckrose, who's an intersectional scholar and second wave feminist, excuse me, and myself, and nobody showed up again.
Right. Okay. But so Peter, even if the panel doesn't work out perfectly, but here, take this way, that there may be Christians, right, in a group of community or a very insular religious community that would like to talk to atheists, but feel that they may lose some of their connections to their own community if they do so. I think that just by having this, even if it's not perfect, will create a crack, create some space for some more people to say, hey, why can't we do this? I think that we have to do that. I think.
Yeah, I'll be blunt. I've actually thought about trying to defend intersectionality to make the conversation more interesting against Lindsay and Rutledge.
You know, that would be very interesting, right? Be able to flip, and that
would be a slaughter. But I was toying with that idea in my head.
And that's a great segue to your defeasibility article. And what you talk about, rather than convincing people with evidence, because you mentioned in this article that the more evidence you have, and you have a very smart person, can basically use that evidence to entrench themselves in the position and refuse to look at contravening evidence. So the question,
that's Michael Shermer's idea.
Yeah, the question, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that instead of saying, why do you believe this, is rather, what would make you not believe this? What would make you change your mind?
Okay, so if I could tell you one thing, and the piece I published in The Skeptic is what I've learned from teaching.
Tell us about this. I Googled Skeptic magazine, Dr. Bogosian, and it came right up on defeasibility.
Yeah,
those three will get you right there.
If there's one thing I've learned in 20 plus years of teaching critical thinking and moral reasoning, it's this: the most important question you can ever ask somebody is not what is your evidence for believing that, is what evidence, even hypothetically, could you be provided that would change your mind? What would it take to change your mind? What would it take to change your behavior? And let me give you a question that one of my students asked me that I think was phenomenal. So I was going off on a rant about Scott Pruitt, and I can't stand the Trump administration and Donald Trump, and I've made that crystal clear. I don't hide my opinions at all. And I had just finished talking about defeasibility, and then one of my students said to me, okay, so applying the concept of defeasibility to your belief about the Trump and the Trump administration, what would it take for you to vote for Trump next time he came up?
It's a good question.
And I said, that's a very legitimate question. I need a minute to think about it. And I thought about it, and I'll tell you what I came up with. But before I do, you guys, I assume you're not Trump supporters, are you?
No, I am not. Brian, I don't know. Where are you, Brian?
I'm not anti-Trump. I'm not on Trump's side.
Okay,
I don't
I'm
think
very anti-Trump.
Yeah, I don't think
what
any
would it take-
reality
Right. And
stars-
MM doesn't have a position at all.
Right.
So these are my personal opinions. I'm not absolutely hating Trump. There's
Okay,
parts
so
that I hate, parts
so
that I think are okay.
answer the question directly. What would it take for you to vote for Trump when he came up again?
For me, wow. Okay, so
It's a hard question, isn't it?
yeah, no, I would think, man.
Well, and it also depends on who's running
okay, some of the
against,
assaults,
too, but I mean, he is
like,
pretty terrible.
Some of the assaults on liberty, like I'm going to pull NBC's license. I think that the same assaults that I see on the left from free speech, I also see coming out of Trump's authoritarian. I'd have to see a huge reduction on authoritarianism. I would like to see the anti-science portion go away to the extent that it exists. You know, a bit more statesmanship.
Stop using Twitter.
You know, right. Like the obnoxiousness on Twitter. Everything's fake news. I would need to see some rigor there.
Yeah.
In that case, that's fine. A rejection of the alt-right would also be good. But those are the things. Yeah. But I mean,
Sean?
like border wall, you know, do it like, I don't know. I'm neutral on a border wall. I could be swayed either way. I
just
don't
think
know.
It's tough for me because I know the game he's playing. I mean, popularity, everything's a popularity contest, and this guy's mastered popularity contest. I mean, he's a reality TV star, became president. I think it's, you know, terrible. I mean, you know, the guy, I don't like any.
So answer the question directly.
I think he would need to change the people that he's putting around him. I would like to see more, you know, because again, the president in a lot of cases is just a figurehead, and he can be as dumb as he wants.
Okay, so if he changes the people around him, is that enough for you to vote for him?
That would help. I mean, and it all depends on who who he's running against. If it's against The Rock and Tom Hanks, well, Jesus Christ. You know, like now this is a terrible decision. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
So I'll give you mine if I may.
Yeah.
Mine was he would bring peace to the Middle East.
Yeah.
And I told that to my wife, and she said that wouldn't be enough. I disagree with her that I'm not saying, in fact, I don't think he could do that. If he could do that. So if he actually did that, well, take a look at Kim Jong-un walking across the border.
Yeah.
From a scale of 0, in which 0 is Trump had absolutely nothing to do with it, to 100, and then it was purely Trump. Trump played some non-zero role in that.
Correct. I believe that's true.
Some non-zero role. But yet, if you listen to people on the left, he's played a 0 role. I just don't think that's
if you listen to people on the right, he had everything to do with it.
In Saudi Arabia, I think he's played a non-zero role too. I mean, this Asra Nomani says, although she hated him doing the sword dance over there, that there's something that Trump has, and maybe it is this gruff kind of things that we see as ugly that's actually helping over there.
Popularity.
And I think you have to take that into account.
So what we're talking about are the elements of defeasibility. Or you could look at, if that's a $2 word, disconfirmation. What would it take to disconfirm your belief? What evidence, even hypothetically, could you be provided? And in A Manual for Creating Atheists, my book, I wrote that when I had a conversation with an apologist, he said, it would take the bones of Christ for me to not believe Jesus was the Son of God, because then Jesus couldn't be risen. But you can ask defeasibility questions of anybody about anything. And in my Impossible Conversation series, and in my book, I go through in great detail how to ask defeasibility questions so that it doesn't invoke a defensive mechanism. Like when I asked you guys don't like Trump, or at least Sean, you don't. When I asked you that, you didn't feel defensive, right?
No. not at all. Everyone
Yeah.
should be open to scrutiny, especially in that position.
Yeah, so we need to teach people how to ask more defeasibility questions. We need to teach people how to have civil conversations. So kind of tying themes together. That was the Atheos app that I did in conjunction with the Richard Dawkins Foundation. That's the element of my first book. And the second book is the latest tools from cult negotiations, hostage negotiations, cult exiting, applied epistemology. That's why I said I've been out of the loop. All I've been doing is reading and researching. We know that there are ways to have conversations. We know that there are ways to talk to people. We know that there are, but that assumes that people want to talk to you. If you can't get anybody on this panel, well, then you could have all the techniques in the world. It's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what I loved about the Atheos app. It teaches you the right questions to ask, and in a lot of cases, that's way more important than sharing your side of the argument. Is asking the right questions, getting people to look at it in a critical way. And again, the atheist community was very, very disappointing to me, because that is something that we've always regarded as important, is to ask critical questions and know what questions to ask, and not be afraid to have these conversations
and be decent to people at the same time.
Be professional. And that's what the app does, what your book does, what you're doing on the campus. I mean, everything you're doing. Sargon's given you praise as well for doing this. He said we need to support Peter and what he's doing. And
I
probably could have used it on Twitter not too long ago, where I probably could have worded something better, and I was able to. I think I stirred up some ire when I probably could have phrased things a lot better, and that's what I think is so good about the app is the phrasing of the questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So that took an unbelievable number of hours. If anybody's interested, it's just atheosapp.com. And you can get it on Android and you can get it on the iPhone. But the idea is similar throughout that, and for what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to open up rich veins of conversation about topics that are sensitive, and usually topics that have some moral resonance. And every time you don't have that conversation, every time you don't talk about it, people become more brittle. And I see that on university campuses now. People are shocked when I'll throw out an idea. Hey, basically, by the way, one thing I'm looking for that I can't seem to find, I want to have an impossible conversation about what policies should govern people who have IQs under 25. And the famous philosopher Peter Singer says that they should basically be treated like animals. And other people, the in view right now, the moral orthodoxy is we extend the full umbrella of rights, responsibilities, et cetera, to these folks. But I would love to have a conversation about that.
It seems like like a pediatric physician that specializes in something like this might get down to the practical, the practical things you're facing in order to make a judgment. I think that would be interesting.
So if I can find people to have that conversation, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, like some of the neuro folks over at OHSU, that'd be interesting.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Anything else on your mind? You guys thinking about questions? Anything?
No, I know you had limited time, and we really appreciate the time this morning. A little off day for us, but no, I mean, like we are. There's so many intersections.
It is
where where you're doing what you're doing, we're doing what we're doing.
Exactly.
Really excited to be.
And what you guys are doing is you are really providing a vital cultural niche, and there's no question in my mind. Again, like you said, it's like Venn diagrams that intersect or overlap. That what you guys are trying to do is have debates and conversations about issues that resonate with people and people who are knowledgeable and sincere. And we aren't seeing those debates. Yeah. And you guys are providing a venue. And shame on those people who are attacking you for providing that. If they don't like it, then why don't they you should have something, invite them. You find somebody that's like, okay, then you come up and we'll give you 20 minutes and then we'll find somebody but if you don't value that in the first place, it's interesting to see that attack. So you're providing a key cultural space, and there's no question in my mind, barring some unforeseen catastrophe, that what you're doing is just going to be more popular and more popular and more popular, and it's just going to keep growing and expanding. And as long as it doesn't become a movement or a community, I think the problem, Sean, you used the phrase atheist community. It's always weird to me to hear that community. It's like the community of non-stamp collectors. It's just an odd.
Yeah.
And that schism in atheism was caused, and the current culture war was caused by those people who think there's insufficient evidence to warrant belief in God, but would change their mind if they were given that evidence. That's me. And people who think there's insufficient evidence to believe in God, and we need social justice, whatever that.
Yeah, it's the lack of diversity within the diversity of thought within atheism. It used to be diverse.
Yeah.
I think that the pro-life movement might be a good example of this going off the rails, right? You almost have to be religious. Where are the secular pro-lifers? That if the pro-life movement would have more diversity of thought, including, making secular arguments, bring these people in there, that they'd be doing a better job.
Yeah, and that's the problem with intersectionality, is they don't have a single canon from which their alleged knowledge comes. So they don't have an apologetics. They don't have a 1 Peter 3:15. They'll never be capable of developing a great defender. They don't value debate. They don't value treating people with kindness. They don't value, but they all have a very saccharine way they interact with people. Just a super sweet kind of insincere way that they've, like an affectation that they have cultivated because they think it's morally right to do so. But anyway, but they don't value those things. So you guys trying to find somebody is going to be particularly difficult when speech is not looked at as a virtue.
Right. And I think part of it deals with labels, those that, what is somebody who supports intersectionality? Yeah. You're going to see a huge bell curve in that person.
Right, one more thing. Do you know how, have you ever heard the, I don't know what it is, but when you're running for president, you want to have more debates if you're losing and fewer debates if you're winning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So these people have won the culture war.
Yeah.
They've already won the culture war. They've had a stranglehold on the radical left. The woke left has a stranglehold. Intersectional feminism, third wave feminism. These folks have a stranglehold on the academy, just like the right wing maniacs have a stranglehold in the Trump administration, and soon the judiciary.
Yeah.
So they know they're winning because these ideas seep out of culture. Somebody was asking about that, and I said, well, do you know what a microaggression is? Yep. Do you know what a trigger warning is? Yep. Do you know what a safe space is? Yep. Do you know what cultural appropriation is? Yep. All of these things come from the canon of the broadly from the journals in gender studies and women's studies. So these things seep out of the university in about 5 to 10 years. So they know they're winning the culture war. So why would they want to sit down and have a debate or a conversation? It would just make no sense, especially when they're completely convinced they have the truth. Yeah, they've already won. It really is the analogy to presidential debates is salient, and I mean, obviously the analog breaks down at a certain point, but why would they? They've won the culture wars.
Yeah. But this is why the Supreme Court writes dissenting opinions, right? The justice that was on the 7-2 side will write a dissenting opinion.
Right.
But I think that's important.
But also too, I think where there's a lot of influence is Hollywood, and Hollywood is extremely influential internationally. And yeah, I believe that narrative is taken over. That's why we have some people from Hollywood coming to the event. We talk to people from Hollywood on the show, because that is one of the areas that is extremely influential. But Peter, what you're doing on campus too, that's another area that's extremely influential. And the fact that you're sticking your neck out there and you have, this board, lording over you and criticizing you, and you're still going forward. I mean, it's truly just impressive and extremely brave. And we need to see more people like that. And hopefully you can inspire others in that field to take it up and partner with you and kind of do the same in their campuses, because these conversations need to happen. And what you're saying, what we're doing in the private sector, that's great. But what you're doing, in the public sector, I mean, that's absolutely huge. And a lot of these kids are shaping their minds and what they're going to be after you're done with school. And
the university would go back to where it used to be, cut into our attendance, right? If the university got back to where they were, we could be kind of irrelevant or not irrelevant, but redundant.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Right now, we're
not no need for your conference.
Yeah, I mean, it would be.
I'm curious,
nice, but not needed.
We can test my hypothesis. Thanks for your kind words. I appreciate that. I do wonder sometimes how much good I'm doing in aggregate, but. Has attendance, people have signed up, is it greater this year than it was last year?
Well, right now, yeah, we have it's trending really well. It's always hard to tell, how it is with any of these events, where you're going to end up. I don't know. We had 650 last year, which was definitely the biggest we've ever done, and kind of the biggest in this secular world, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so far this year it's trending, and we've gotten way more speakers, and there's a lot of interest. So we're hoping, we never like to say definites, because you never know.
Real quick question, if I can interrupt, a question from a chat.
Yeah.
Like, it says, is it only like a non-PC politician like Trump that ever can move anything in the Middle East? Maybe. I mean, and what I cite Ali Rizvi, and another, and
good guy,
Chile,
wonderful book.
And who was the guy from Chile? Dago
Daggett. Yeah.
And it was
Lalo Daggett.
Yeah. And I said, well, I don't come from an anti-theist bent. I don't. And he goes, well, I do. And he was criticizing my quote unquote too nice version of of talking with people. And he says, in the Middle East, and when I talk to people, he goes, people don't respect that. They want the hard hitting, boom, bang. That's it. Fine. And I concede the point. I'm like, okay, well, you know more about that than I do. So it is possible that non-PC does work better, over there. And again, but doesn't work as well here. So yeah, that's why I think Trump, you can have a good and a bad. Just like smart is good, but smart can be arrogant. Like every positive thing has probably a flip side to it.
Well, Peter, I just had a quick question for you. Do you have any connections to the University of Chicago?
Some. Jerry Coyne is a professor emeritus there.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, because what they did and their principles, I mean, that was fantastic. And
yeah.
Yeah. So
what do you think? Why don't Peter? Can you take a shot on the question from the chat?
Which one specifically?
Does the Middle East or some of these other more authoritarian nations need a non-PC leader to get any movement over there?
I have absolutely no idea. That's way out of my area.
That's fair.
But I don't think we can rule it out. I think that's a question that ought to be asked.
But and to close up that whole Trump thing, I think it would really help him again. He's a celebrity, and whether you like it or not, people want to be a celebrity, no matter where they're from, what country. The celebrity status really helps, and it's an interesting.
The point of my Trump question was that it's an example of defeasibility. You take an idea, you take something that. Of course, someone hates Trump or whatever. Well, what would it take you? Nothing. If someone says, well, I would never vote for him no matter what. Really, no matter what. So you hold the belief religiously. So if he cured global war, if he cured cancer from initiatives, brought peace in the Middle East, initiated a climate reversal, climate change, carbon sink program, and remove pollution from you still wouldn't vote for him. Yeah. So you hold the position religiously.
Right. But the point money got there.
It doesn't have to be Trump. It's just, you can ask that about anyone. You don't believe in ghosts? Okay. No. Under what evidence would you have to be provided with to change your mind? That's a defeasibility question. And the content of that question is irrelevant, but I just used Trump because I thought it was because it operates in the political arena. But I just thought it was such an interesting question.
No, it is. And everyone's going to have a different standard for their defeasibility. Yeah. Azra Nomani, she detailed her reasoning that at Mythcon. So I would suggest looking at the Mythcon 4 debate between her and Faisal. If you want to get her opinion on that, she's probably better able to.
Faisal's a very good friend of mine. We did something at PSU together on our Western values.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. I saw that. And yeah, Peter, I know your time is limited, and thank you so much. And we're really honored to have you coming to Milwaukee. Finally, we'll have you in Milwaukee. Yeah. And I'm excited, and I know Brian and the whole team's excited just to see how that panel works out. And again, if there's anyone out there that's interested, that knows somebody that would, be qualified, please let us know.
You can have a direct influence on Mythcon.
Yes. Sure. Yeah. So, but Peter, I just want to thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. And thank you guys for what you're doing. I appreciate it. And I think you're doing very, very valuable work. People need to be exposed to these ideas and hear these conversations. So thanks for your work. And I appreciate you've been very supportive of my stuff. And I am very grateful for that.
Well, I'm the same, and that's extremely high praise. And you've been very supportive of us even before any of the Mythcon stuff. And we appreciate our partnership.
And supportive doesn't always mean agreement. At Kilroy,
course,
there was a small crowd gathered around Peter and I who were parsing out a disagreement. That was a really good conversation. I enjoyed that. It's just supportive of that overall mission.
Absolutely.
Where you have to have debate to reduce the effects of authoritarianism. So that's a great point of agreement.
Well, thanks a lot, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.
All right, Peter. Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.